Well, thank you and welcome everyone to our conversation with Miss Chloe Zhao. And well, I'm very excited. So, shall we begin? Many people think of representation as something that happens in front of the camera. But as a director, what's your perspective on representation from behind the camera?
Thank you for having me, first of all. And I'm really glad to be here. I feel that if we, as storytellers, stay really true to the type of story we want to tell and work with the people that we want to work with, because we know that they each have their own experiences, life experiences, and backgrounds that they're bringing in that's going to enrich the story. If we stay true to that, representation will happen very naturally, because each of us are so different from each other and so diverse. At the same time, we also share a lot of similarities. So by having both diversity in front and behind the camera, we're able to learn so much from each other. And that's, so important, if not even more important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chloe. I personally always thought that diversity should not only be visual, but also intellectual, because consciously or unconsciously, our cultural backgrounds tend to have a huge impact on the way we view and produce art. So it's always very interesting to see how we tell our own stories through our personal perspectives, especially as women of color. And I think that's what make your movies you make so special.
Thank
And
you.
now, speaking of women of color, you are the very first one to win the Best Director Oscar and the second ever woman. So I personally want to congratulate you for those groundbreaking achievements and also ask you, what does that say about where we are and how far we might have to go in gaining equality in your field?
Equality in our field is a much broader and deeper conversation than just awards and numbers. So it's hard to really measure whether we achieved equality or not by how many people win awards or how many filmmakers in these festivals, because I think sometimes it's difficult to question the very system that that has been built, and that we exist in. Is easier to have a conversation of who should sit at the head of the table at this one house that we all think is the only house we can live in. And we want to make sure there's more diversity sitting at the head of that table. But I also encourage that many of us, especially young people, think about maybe there don't need to be just one house. Maybe there can be many, many houses, because that house was built with a history and certain kind of complication that made us believe that that's the only house. So that's the only head of the table. It's not true. And I think young people are already starting to ask that question. I think that's a very exciting conversation to consider, on top of having more diversity at the head of that house.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, as I told you the other time, I myself dream of becoming a filmmaker one day, and I know many other girls and young people that are also interested in cinema. So seeing stories like yours, like you mentioned, being on the top of the table, I think they are extremely important and empowering for the youth that hope to make it in an industry that's so competitive and it tends to be unequal, less the film industry.
Very important, but definitely remember that if you can't get to that height of the table, we have arrived at a time you can build other houses.
Yeah, exactly.
Do not be discouraged just because they don't let you in the house.
Okay, that's a very great perspective. Thank you for sharing it. Now, going back to the importance of diversity behind the scenes in the film industry, I think storytelling in all its mediums can have a huge impact on how audiences view different groups, issues, and movements. So, can you tell me about what inspires you to tell the stories you tell in your films?
I am very much inspired by questions I ask myself. I try not to look too much at what's the trend, what's the issue of the day? What are people interested in now? Because that might make your film popular for a moment, but you want to create work that's going to age, with the time, that's going to be timeless, that people can still have conversation about it 10 years, 20 years later. So to do that, you have to create work that has a universal appeal, that can be related by all people, so then at the end of the day, we're all human beings. That's what we share the most. So I asked myself, so what are some of the life questions that I have, things that I want to learn, how I want to grow as a person. So then from there, I come up with the story, and I ask myself which part of the world, which culture that I think I can learn from. It's all about growing as a person. And so then that way of working also help you sustain a lot of the difficulties, because it will keep you curious, and because you're growing as an individual, it isn't just about doing a job.
Wow, that was such a beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing it.
Sure.
And I also have this question about, what is one small thing that we can all do to share our stories or use our stories to make a difference in the world today?
One small thing we can all do. I think it's not small, but I think we can do whatever we can to be grateful, be joyful, and be grateful with what we have right here, right now. Doesn't mean we can't have changes, but when you're creating, when you're about to get in front of your laptop to write your screenplay, try to be grateful that you can do this. Be grateful of and see the positive in your life, because if we can get ourselves in a joyful place when we create, that's where compassion and understanding for others is possible, because our hearts are open. You can still write really hard hitting, like really difficult stories and challenging stories and controversial stories, but creating from a place of joy, our story will reflect that. And that's where compassion and understandings for others live. So I think it's really important for creators to do that.
Wow. Yeah, I totally agree. And thank you as well for sharing that answer. And thank you so much for answering all of the questions and for joining me today and joining us at the Girl of Leadership Summit. It was I was very honored to hear from you and to learn from you as well. I personally admire you so much, and I believe that your journey as a director is one that will go down in history books. So
thank you so much. And best of luck with your journey as a filmmaker. It's very exciting.
Thank you very much. Hopefully one day I'll have the joy to work with you one day.
I hope so too. All right, take care.
You too. Now let's go back to our MCs.